My name is Ava Carter. I'm 28 years old, and until last year, I thought success meant keeping the peace. I thought loyalty to family came before ambition. But betrayal, especially when it comes from someone who helped raise you, changes how you see everything. I grew up in a small suburb of Portland, Oregon, in a family that believed in practicality over dreams. My dad ran a small auto repair shop, my mom was a nurse, and my uncle, Dad's younger brother, Uncle Grant, was the family genius. At least, that's what everyone said. He worked in product development for a mid-sized tech company, and during family gatherings, people would always crowd around him, asking about the next big thing. I was the quiet one, the kid who spent more time dismantling old radios and soldering wires in the garage than talking at dinner. I liked patterns, logic, and figuring out how things worked. But whenever I tried to show my projects, Uncle Grant would smirk and say things like, "Cute, Ava. You'll make a good hobbyist someday." He was charming, too charming, the kind of man who smiled while he diminished you. When I was 17, I built a prototype of a low-cost portable air quality sensor for a science fair. It could detect carbon levels and airborne pollutants using cheap sensors and a modified microchip. My idea was simple: make clean air awareness affordable for everyone. The judges didn't understand half of it, but my uncle did. He was the one who drove me home that night after I got third place. I remember the way he said, "You've got talent, kid. You need someone who knows how the world works." At the time, I took it as encouragement. I didn't realize it was foreshadowing. Fast forward 10 years. I'd graduated with a degree in environmental engineering, working long hours at a startup that built eco-tech devices. My personal project, the one that mattered to me, was an evolved version of that teenage prototype. I'd been developing it quietly in my apartment, a smart air quality tracker that could sync with a phone app and send alerts when pollution levels spiked. I called it Aeroband. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was working, and it was mine. Then one night, my uncle showed up at my door. It was right after my father had surgery, and we were all emotionally drained. Grant came in with takeout, his usual smooth smile, and after dinner, he noticed my cluttered desk. "What's all this?" he asked, picking up a circuit board. "It's a personal project," I said, suddenly protective. He turned it over in his hands, studying it. "Still tinkering, huh? You never stop." "I guess not." He asked questions, specific ones about what the board did, how I processed the data, what components I was using. At the time, I thought he was impressed. I even felt a spark of pride when he said, "This could really be something, Ava." Over the next few weeks, he started calling me more often, asking how the prototype was going. He even offered to introduce me to people at his company. "Just to get feedback," he said. I should have been more cautious. But when someone you've known your whole life offers to help, it doesn't cross your mind they might be scheming. A few months later, my life started to unravel. It began innocently. A text from him saying, "You won't believe this, kiddo. My team's been developing something similar to your Aeroband idea. Great minds think alike, huh?" At first, I was confused. Then I saw the press release. His company, Virion Technologies, had just announced a revolutionary personal air monitoring wearable that sounded almost identical to my design. The diagrams, the features, even the tagline, "Breathe smarter." My heart stopped. I opened the pictures and realized they'd used my exact prototype structure, right down to the sensor placement. I scrolled through the details in disbelief, searching for any mention of me. There wasn't one. My uncle's name, though, was everywhere. Lead innovator Grant Lawson spearheads a new era of air awareness technology. I remember sitting in my apartment, staring at the screen until my vision blurred. I called him immediately. "Grant, what the hell is this?" I demanded. He laughed softly. "Whoa, calm down. I told you my team was working on something similar. Maybe your little hobby inspired me, who knows?" "Inspired you?" "I showed you my designs. You showed me a prototype made from duct tape and hope," he said coldly. "You didn't have a patent. You didn't have investors. You didn't even have a plan. I did." There was silence on my end. I couldn't even breathe. He added, "Look, Ava, I didn't steal anything. Ideas float around. The world doesn't reward dreamers. It rewards doers. You should be proud. You were part of the spark. I hung up on him. Then I cried until my throat burned. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I oscillated between rage and shame. I felt stupid, betrayed. I tried talking to my parents, but my dad said, "He's family's sweetheart. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Don't go to war over this." But I couldn't let it go. Every time I saw a news article about the Virion airband, it felt like someone twisting a knife in my chest. I contacted an intellectual property attorney, but he told me what I already knew, without prior patent filings, emails, or dated technical documentation. My case was weak. Unless you can prove he had access to your prototype and directly copied it, the lawyer said, it's nearly impossible. Of course, he had access, but proving it was another matter. I almost gave up. For a while, I stopped working on anything. I stopped coding, stopped building. I watched from afar as Virion's product climbed in popularity. My uncle became a minor celebrity in the tech scene, appearing in interviews, smiling beside models, wearing his creation. And I just shrank. One night, while scrolling aimlessly, I found an online clip of him accepting an industry award. He stood under bright lights, saying, "Innovation isn't about where an idea starts, it's about who's brave enough to make it real." That was it. Something inside me snapped. I didn't want revenge, not yet. I just wanted my voice back. So I started digging. I went through my old notebooks, code backups, and emails. To my surprise, I found time-stamped photos from my old laptop, images of my prototype taken 6 months before his company's first internal memo about airband. I found voice memos I'd recorded, talking about airflow calibration and software bugs. And I still had text messages from him asking, "Send me the sensor code again. Want to test something?" That was my proof. I contacted a different lawyer, this time one who specialized in whistleblower and tech IP cases. He reviewed my material and said quietly, "Ava, this is more than enough to start a claim." He advised me to stay quiet for now, to document everything. Meanwhile, we prepared a legal notice to send to Virion once we filed. But something unexpected happened before we even reached that point. One morning, I got a call from a woman named Elena Morales. She was a producer for a major tech conference, the same one where Virion was going to showcase its next-gen wearable. "I'm reaching out to you, Ava Carter," she said. "I found your LinkedIn profile while researching early contributors to wearable air sensors. I'd love to talk about your experience." I froze. You know about my work?" She laughed softly. "Oh, I know more than you think. Let's just say people talk, and not everyone believes the official story." That call changed everything. We met a week later at a coffee shop. She told me off the record that multiple engineers from Virion had left quietly, frustrated by Grant's ego and ethics. Some had told her he'd presented pre-existing work as his own. She looked at me across the table and said, "If you're ready to tell your side, I can help make sure people hear it." For the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. Still, I hesitated. Going public would mean confronting my family, my uncle's lawyers, and possibly ruining my parents' peace. My mom begged me not to make a scene. But when I closed my eyes, all I could see was him standing on that stage, taking bows for something I had built with my own hands. I emailed Elena the next morning. "I'm ready." When I walked into the conference hall 3 months later, it felt surreal. Giant banners hung from the ceiling with Virion Technologies printed in bold. Grant was already there, shaking hands with journalists. He looked so sure of himself, so untouchable. Elena had told me to sit tight and let things unfold. I was nervous, gripping my badge so tightly that my knuckles turned white. When the CEO took the stage, I barely heard the introduction. Then, halfway through his speech, he paused and smiled toward the audience. "Before we continue," he said, "there's someone very special we need to recognize, someone whose early vision and hard work made this technology possible." Grant's confident smile faltered for the first time. The CEO turned toward the audience, lifted the mic, and said my name. "Ava Carter." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The sound of my name, Ava Carter, echoed across the hall like a dream I wasn't ready to believe. People began turning, scanning the crowd, and before I could process what was happening, the CEO repeated it. "She's right here with us today," he said, smiling warmly. "The original creator of the prototype that inspired the Virion airband. Let's give her a round of applause." Applause. Actual applause. My body went cold. My breath caught in my chest as the sound swelled around me. Polite at first, then building into something thunderous. The lights felt too bright. I could feel the heat of hundreds of stares pressing against my skin. And then, from across the stage, I saw him, Grant. His smile had frozen mid-expression. He looked like someone had just unplugged him. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't even blink. Then his eyes found mine in the crowd, and I saw it clearly. Panic. It was the first time in my life I'd ever seen him look small. Someone from the conference staff motioned for me to come forward. I stood up, my legs trembling. I could barely hear myself think through the pounding in my chest. As I made my way down the aisle, flashes went off, cameras, phones, curious faces. I stepped onto the stage, and the CEO extended his hand. "Miss Carter," he said into the mic, "it's an honor to finally meet the woman behind the idea that started it all." My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, to say something meaningful, but my mind was spinning. Grant finally moved. He walked toward us, his expression smoothed into a counterfeit grin, though his eyes were screaming. "Ava," he said loudly, forcing a laugh that barely masked his anger. "Wow, I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I." The CEO looked between us. "You two know each other?" "Oh, we're family," Grant said quickly, placing a hand on my shoulder like it was some sort of claim. "Ava's my niece. She's incredibly talented, always tinkering with projects." There it was. The same tone he'd used all my life, casual dismissal disguised as praise. But this time, something inside me shifted. I gently moved his hand off my shoulder and said, clearly enough for the microphone to catch it, "Actually, the aeroband prototype I created was the foundation your company used to develop the airband. I showed my uncle the original model 2 years before Virion filed their first patent." The room went silent. The CEO blinked, clearly taken off guard. Grant gave a short, incredulous laugh. "That's a misunderstanding," he said, his voice tightening. "We were both brainstorming ideas at the time. Ava was just experimenting. I took her inspiration and built a scalable product." I met his gaze and said softly, "You mean you stole it?" Gasps rippled through the audience. The CEO's pleasant smile faltered, replaced with confusion. "Grant, is there truth to that?" Grant hesitated, then forced another laugh, but his voice cracked just slightly. "Of course not. You know how family is, everyone wants to feel involved." "Funny," I said, "because I still have the original code, schematics, and time-stamped documentation. The same files you asked for when you said you wanted to test something." Now there was a real murmur in the crowd, low, electric, dangerous. Journalists in the front row began typing furiously on their laptops. The CEO's face hardened. "Why don't we take a short break?" he said, his PR smile returning. "We'll be right back, folks." He gestured for us to follow him backstage. As soon as the curtain dropped behind us, the air grew thick. The noise from the audience faded into a muffled hum. Grant turned on me, voice sharp. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I crossed my arms, telling the truth. "You just humiliated me in front of the entire industry," he hissed. "You humiliated yourself when you stole from me." He stepped closer, his jaw tight. "You don't understand how this world works. You had a prototype, barely functioning. I made it viable. I made it profitable. You should be thanking me." "I should thank you for erasing my name?" I shot back. "For stealing the one thing I built from scratch because you didn't think I'd have the guts to fight back?" The CEO cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Lawson," he said to Grant, "if what Ava's saying is true, this is serious. Intellectual property theft is not something our company takes lightly." Grant's voice rose. "It's not theft if it wasn't patented. She never protected it legally." I turned to the CEO. "He's right. I didn't have a patent, but I have proof that my design predates their development phase. He used my files, my code, and my concept without credit. And I have every message to prove it. The CEO rubbed his temples. We'll need to see everything, he said. This changes things. I nodded. You'll have it. Grant glared at me like he wanted to scream. You're making a mistake, he muttered. No, I said, voice steady now. You did. That moment, just those few seconds, felt like the air itself had shifted. I could see it in his face. The man who once made me doubt every ounce of my worth now stood cornered, terrified of the truth finally catching up to him. The conference ended early that day. Virion issued a vague statement about ongoing internal reviews, and Grant disappeared from the venue before anyone could question him further. But the internet didn't wait. Within hours, clips of the moment I confronted him were everywhere: Twitter, Reddit, YouTube. The hashtags #Aeroband and #AvaCarter started trending. People called me a genius, a whistleblower, a symbol of women in tech. But I didn't feel like any of those things. I felt hollow. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the screen as my phone buzzed nonstop with messages and emails from journalists. My hands shook as I read comments from strangers who said things like, "She's so brave," or "She got what she deserved." They didn't know that I wasn't celebrating. I was grieving. Because for all the vindication I felt, there was also the quiet ache of losing family. My uncle had been a constant presence in my life. My dad's brother, my childhood mentor, the person who once told me I could do anything. And now he was my enemy. The next morning, I got a call from my dad. I hesitated before answering. "Ava," he said, his voice tired. "What happened yesterday?" "You saw it. Everyone saw it," he said quietly. "Your uncle's been calling nonstop. He's saying you ambushed him." "Dad, he stole my work." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, slow and heavy. I know he took advantage, but couldn't you have handled this privately? He's family." "Dad," I said softly, "he stopped being family when he decided my work was worth more than my dignity." He didn't reply. Eventually, he just sighed. "I don't want this to tear us apart." "It already has," I said. We didn't talk for a while after that. Meanwhile, the investigation began. Virion's legal department requested documentation, and my lawyer delivered everything: emails, texts, code versions, even early blueprints. The evidence was overwhelming. I stayed quiet online, resisting interviews or public statements. My lawyer said it was best to let the facts speak for themselves. But as the days passed, curiosity turned into controversy. Tech blogs published exposés comparing my prototype photos to Virion's internal filings. The similarities were undeniable. Then came the article that broke everything open. Insider confirms Ava Carter as true inventor of Virion Airband. A whistleblower from Virion leaked internal emails where Grant admitted he'd borrowed my concept before the company's pitch meeting. He'd even bragged about saving the idea from obscurity. The fallout was immediate. Virion's stock dropped. The company distanced itself from Grant, placing him on administrative leave pending investigation. And me? Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. One evening, I received an email from Elena, the producer who'd helped me months earlier. It was short but powerful. "You did it, Ava. The truth's finally out." I read it 3 times, my chest tightening. Still, it didn't feel like victory. Because behind the vindication was guilt, the kind that seeps in when you realize justice doesn't erase pain. My parents were caught in the middle, torn between loyalty and disappointment. My mother texted me, "I'm proud of you, but please be careful. Families don't recover from things like this easily." She was right. But something deeper inside me whispered that some things weren't meant to be quietly forgiven. A week later, Virion called me. The CEO himself wanted to meet privately. He said, "Ava, we've reviewed your claims, and we're prepared to make this right." That phrase, "make this right," stuck with me. I didn't know what it meant yet. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let anyone else decide the terms of my justice again. So I agreed to meet. As I hung up, I looked at the photo on my desk, me as a kid, holding up that first air quality sensor, smiling beside my uncle. My hand trembled as I turned the picture face down. That chapter of my life was over. Or, at least, I thought it was. I sat in the lobby of Virion Technologies with my palms pressed against my knees, trying to stop the trembling. The walls were glass, the furniture sleek and sterile. Everything about the place screamed success. I'd imagined walking into this building once, years ago, as a young engineer showing off for Invention. I never imagined it would be under these circumstances. The receptionist offered me a polite, uncertain smile. "Mr. Langford will see you shortly," she said. I nodded, clutching the strap of my bag. Inside were printed copies of my schematics, my notes, and every piece of evidence my lawyer said I might need, though by now most of it had already made its way through the press. When the assistant finally appeared and led me through a maze of corridors, my stomach twisted. We stopped at a large door with frosted glass. "Go right in," she said. Inside, Michael Langford, Virion's CEO, was waiting by the window. He turned when I entered, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and tired eyes. He smiled, tightly but genuinely. "Ava," he said, "thank you for coming." I shook his hand. "Thank you for reaching out." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit." As I did, he leaned against his desk, exhaling slowly. "I'll be honest," he began. "This situation has been messy, to say the least. When I first heard your name, I assumed it was just internet noise. But after reviewing the documentation, your code, your photos, the emails, there's no denying it. The airband wouldn't exist without your work." Hearing those words out loud made something in me ache. I'd waited months, years, even, for someone to acknowledge that truth. "Then why is he still on administrative leave?" I asked quietly. Langford hesitated. "Because corporate procedures move slower than justice does in the real world," he said. "We have contracts, investors, and public relations to consider. But I can assure you, Grant Lawson will never represent this company again." I stared at him. "So that's it? He gets fired and we all move on?" "Not exactly." He sat down across from me. "We'd like to make things right with you. I've already spoken with our board. We're prepared to offer a public acknowledgement of your contribution, a financial settlement, and, if you're interested, a position at Virion. Head of Product Innovation." I blinked. "You're offering me a job?" He smiled faintly. "You've already proven your vision and capability. The world knows your name now, and frankly, we'd rather be standing beside you than across from you." It was surreal. A part of me wanted to scream yes, to grab the offer, step into the role I'd always dreamed of, and finally get the recognition I deserved. But another part of me, the part that still saw my uncle's smirk, whispered caution. "What about the airband patents?" I asked. "They're built on my design." Langford nodded. "We're willing to amend the filings to include you as co-inventor and co-patent holder. Legally, that would secure your rights and future royalties." The words hit me like cold water. Co-inventor. Not sole. Co. I repeated. He looked uncomfortable. "Ava, I understand how that sounds, but our legal counsel believes that due to the integration and redesign phases led by our team, complete reallocation might not be feasible. We're trying to find a middle ground." Middle ground. The phrase stung. Grant steals my design, lies to everyone, and I'm being offered a middle ground? "I appreciate the gesture," I said carefully, "but if I accept co-inventorship, I'm acknowledging his contribution too. The same man who took my files without permission." Langford leaned forward. "Look, I'm not defending him, but this could be a way to move forward without dragging this through years of litigation. You'd have your name on every unit sold. You'd be part of Virion's legacy." I studied him. He was calm, reasonable, even empathetic, but beneath it all, I could hear the corporate tone. Protect the company first. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course," he said, his relief almost visible. "Take your time. My assistant will send the draft terms. I'll personally make sure it's handled with respect." As I stood to leave, he added, "For what it's worth, Ava, I'm sorry. This industry eats people like you alive. I hope you'll let us make this right." I left the office feeling hollow. The elevator ride down felt endless. When I finally stepped outside, the afternoon sun felt sharp against my skin. I walked for blocks without direction, my mind spinning. They wanted to make me co-inventor. They wanted to give me money, a job, prestige, but not justice. That night, I called Elena, the journalist who had helped me. She picked up on the first ring.
"So," she said.
"How did it go?" "They offered me a job," I said flatly. Her pause was long. And they want to list me as co-inventor with him." She sighed. "Of course they do. They want to bury the scandal without admitting total guilt." "I don't know what to do," I said quietly. "If I fight, it could take years. If I accept, I'll always know it's not the full truth." Elena's voice softened. "What do you want, Ava?" I didn't answer right away. I'd been asking myself that same question for months. For so long, all I'd wanted was recognition, to be seen. But now that I finally had it, it felt tainted. I wanted something deeper. I wanted honesty, accountability. "I want him to admit what he did," I said finally, publicly. "I want him to look at me and say it." Elena was silent for a moment. "Then make that part of your deal," she said. "Don't let them buy your silence. Make them show the world the truth." Her words echoed in my head all night. The next morning, I drafted my own terms. I spent hours rewriting them, adding clauses, deleting others, until my vision was clear. I'd only accept their offer if the company held a press conference publicly crediting me as the original inventor, and if Grant personally issued a recorded apology acknowledging his theft. When my lawyer saw the document, he blinked. "You're not asking for money?"
"Not a dime," I said.
"I don't want their check. I want my name back." He gave a small smile. "That's rare, Ava. Most people would settle." "I've spent enough of my life settling." We sent the terms that afternoon.
For 2 days, silence.
Then Langford called. His tone was measured, cautious. "Ava, we received your proposal. It's unusual, but not unreasonable. However, I can't promise Grant's cooperation." "Then you'll have to choose," I said. "Do you want the company's name cleared or dragged through another scandal?" There was a pause, followed by a quiet exhale. "Let me see what I can do." That week felt like waiting for a storm to hit. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. My parents called a few times, urging me to let it go.
"You've already won," my mom said.
Why make it worse? But to me, the victory wasn't complete until he said it. 3 days later, my lawyer texted. They agreed. I stared at the screen for a long time before the words sank in. Virion had accepted my conditions. The apology would be delivered live, at a press event the following Monday. That Monday morning, I stood backstage again at a Virion venue, almost exactly where I'd been during the conference weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. Same stage, same spot, same tension. Except this time, I was the one waiting for him. When Grant arrived, his face was pale and drawn. He looked older, smaller, stripped of the arrogance he once wore like armor. He didn't look at me when he said, "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" I met his gaze calmly. "No," I said. "I'm surviving it." He gave a bitter laugh. "You could have taken the deal quietly. You didn't have to humiliate me again." "You did that yourself," I said softly. "You took everything from me. The least you can do is give back the truth." Before he could respond, an assistant gestured that it was time. The stage lights came up. Cameras blinked red. The CEO stepped to the podium and began his speech. "This company," he said, "has always prided itself on innovation, integrity, and collaboration. But we recently learned that not all of our success stories have reflected those values. Today, we're here to correct the record." He looked toward us. Ms. Ava Carter, the original creator of the Aeroband prototype, without whom the Airband project would never have existed, is now officially recognized as its sole inventor. Applause filled the room. I stood still, numb. Then Langford turned toward Grant. "Mr. Lawson would also like to share a few words." Grant stepped up to the microphone, his hands visibly shaking. He cleared his throat. I want to apologize," he began, his voice hoarse. "To Ava, to the company, and to the public. What I did was wrong. I took something that wasn't mine and I justified it because I thought I deserved the credit. I didn't. She did. For a long moment, no one moved. His words hung in the air like smoke. Then I stepped forward. My voice trembled, but I forced it out. Apology accepted, I said. But forgiveness, that takes time. The crowd applauded again, but this time, it wasn't for him. It was for me. That night, as I walked out of the building into the cool air, I looked up at the city lights. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. He'd finally said it. The truth was no longer buried in his shadow. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something new. Something that was finally, completely mine. When I woke up that morning, I had a message from Clara. Come to the office early.
Don't ask why.
Just trust me. I didn't even brush my hair properly. I threw on a black hoodie and jeans, grabbed my phone and keys, and drove to the company like I was chasing a lifeline. The streets of Seattle were still gray from dawn, and my chest tightened with every red light. My mind ran through possibilities. Maybe she had news about my uncle, maybe she had found something new, or maybe, just maybe, someone had finally listened. When I arrived, Clara was waiting for me in the lobby, clutching a coffee like she'd been up all night. Her face was pale but determined. Come upstairs, she whispered, her voice shaking a little. You need to see this. We walked to her cubicle, which overlooked the city skyline. On her monitor was an email thread, dozens of messages between executives, the CEO, and my uncle. My name appeared several times, red circled. Clara scrolled to the top and said, You were right, Lily. He did it all to you deliberately. He took credit, and then when the CEO questioned who designed the prototype first, he said you contributed ideas but didn't have the technical ability to make it work. My throat felt tight. He said that. Clara nodded, grimacing.
Worse.
He told him you had emotional problems, that you'd had difficulty focusing, and that's why he took over the project. For a second, I just stared at the screen. It felt like watching my dignity be erased line by line. Emotional problems? Difficulty focusing? He had taken my work and turned me into a liability. A joke. Clara continued scrolling, showing me an attached PowerPoint, the presentation he gave the CEO. I recognized every design, every sketch. The first prototype image even had my handwriting in the corner. I had written adjust sensor tolerance to 0.3, my exact words, in blue ink. He hadn't even bothered to erase them. I sat down hard, the world spinning. Why are you showing me this now? I asked weakly. Because something's happening today, Clara said. The CEO is giving a live television interview for the tech summit. He's going to announce a collaboration deal and mention the lead designer by name. I blinked at her, trying to understand. You mean he's going to mention Ethan's name? She shook her head slowly.
No.
He's going to mention yours. My heart stopped. Clara leaned closer, lowering her voice. I sent everything. Every file, every timestamp, every sketch. I sent the original documents from your drive, the ones with your metadata. The CEO knows. He confronted Ethan yesterday evening. I covered my mouth, overwhelmed. Oh my God. He tried to deny it, she said softly. But there's too much evidence. The CEO didn't tell the press yet, but I think he's going to correct it publicly. He was furious, Lily. For the first time in months, I felt something crack open inside me, a flicker of light that felt almost like relief. But beneath that light was fear. Publicly? What would happen when Ethan found out I had gone behind his back? I turned to Clara. You could lose your job for this. She shrugged with a tired smile. Then it's worth it. I hugged her before I even realized what I was doing. Thank you, I whispered. That afternoon, the whole office buzzed with anticipation. Every screen was tuned to the live tech broadcast. Ethan hadn't shown up yet. His office was empty, his phone going straight to voicemail. I sat at the far end of the conference room, hidden behind the others, my heart pounding in my throat as the CEO appeared on screen. Today, the CEO said, smiling for the cameras, we're proud to announce a revolutionary step forward for adaptive sensory robotics. This innovation has been in the works for years. But what makes it special is not just the technology, but the mind behind it. The room went quiet. The CEO paused, then continued, his tone sharp but deliberate. I want to take a moment to correct a mistake. The brilliant mind who developed the original design and made this breakthrough possible is not Mr. Ethan Hale, as previously credited, but Lily Carter. I stopped breathing. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Wait, Lily." Another said, "Did he just say her name?" I stared at the screen as if it might vanish. My name, echoed through the speakers. The CEO even held up one of my early prototype sketches, the one with my handwriting visible in the corner. Ethan walked in right at that moment. He froze at the doorway, eyes darting to the screen. The timing was poetic. The CEO was still talking. Ms. Carter's commitment to innovation and integrity has set a new benchmark for the future of our company. We're proud to have her on our team. All eyes turned to me. Ethan's face drained of color, his jaw tightening. For a few seconds, I thought he'd lunge at me. But instead, he forced a stiff smile and walked straight out of the room. The door slammed hard enough to make the glass tremble. I couldn't move. My hands shook uncontrollably, tears pooling in my eyes. Months of humiliation, gaslighting, and self-doubt, undone by one televised sentence. I didn't even realize people were clapping until Clara put her arm around me. "You did it," she whispered. "He can't take it back now." But as the applause faded, reality hit me. This wasn't over. Later that day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters wanted interviews. Colleagues who'd avoided me suddenly wanted to catch up. But I ignored them all. I just went home, shut the door, and collapsed on the couch. For the first time in a long time, I cried, not out of pain but out of release. The next morning, everything exploded online. The clip of the CEO naming me went viral on LinkedIn, Twitter, even YouTube. Articles appeared with headlines like, "Engineer reclaims credit after shocking corporate mix-up." People were tagging me, congratulating me, sharing my story. But amid the noise, there was one email that stood out from Ethan. It was short. "You think you won? You humiliated me in front of the entire industry. I made you who you are, Lily. You owe me." I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. The arrogance, the entitlement, it was all still there. He didn't feel guilt. He felt injured. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt something colder, steadier, the kind of strength that comes when you stop letting someone define your worth. I wrote back, "You didn't make me.
You stole from me.
And the world finally knows it. That's on you." I didn't wait for a reply. I blocked him. For a while, things moved fast. HR called me in. The CEO met me personally, apologized on behalf of the company, and offered a promotion to lead developer on the next phase of the project. It felt surreal. The same people who had dismissed me now looked at me with admiration. Still, I couldn't shake the shadow of everything I'd lost. My uncle had been like a second father to me once. He taught me to ride a bike, helped me with my first science fair project. And now, when I thought about him, all I felt was bitterness. I tried not to, but sometimes I wondered what had broken him, what had made him decide that his success mattered more than his family. One evening, about 2 weeks after the broadcast, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Lily," a voice said quietly. It was Ethan. He sounded different. "Can we talk?" Every instinct told me to hang up. But something in his tone, strained, desperate, made me pause. "I don't think there's anything left to say," I replied coldly. He hesitated, then sighed. "I lost everything. The company's letting me go. The CEO won't take my calls. The investors, they think I'm toxic now." There was a strange emptiness in his words. For a fleeting second, I almost felt pity. But then I remembered the nights I spent crying, the shame, the fear, the way he'd erased me from my own work. "That was your choice, Ethan," I said softly. "You did this to yourself." He let out a bitter laugh. "You sound just like your mother. Always self-righteous." "I guess that's better than being a liar," I snapped, then ended the call. I stood there for a long time, staring at my phone. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was also peaceful. I realized I didn't owe him forgiveness.
Not now.
Maybe not ever. That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting something new, a design that had been sitting in my head for months. Not because I needed to prove myself anymore, but because for the first time, I could create without fear, without anyone taking it away. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. The weeks after Ethan's exposure felt like walking through sunlight after years in the dark, but the brightness burned sometimes. Everywhere I went, someone recognized me. People whispered in elevators, journalists sent emails asking for my side of the story, and LinkedIn connections multiplied overnight. For a while, I smiled politely and told myself this was justice. But at night, when the house went quiet, I would stare at my ceiling and wonder if justice ever really fixed anything. The world knew what he did. He lost everything. And yet, inside me, there was still a hollow ache, a space where trust used to live. I tried to fill it with work. The company was pushing ahead with phase 2 of the prototype, and the CEO had made me lead developer. It felt good to walk into meetings and see people actually listen. Still, every time someone said my name, I flinched a little, half expecting someone to correct them, as if I didn't deserve the recognition. One evening, I stayed late, finalizing design updates. The office was quiet, just the hum of machines and the soft flicker of city lights through the glass. I was reviewing the sensor algorithm when I noticed an external device plugged into the computer, a small black USB drive. I frowned. No one else had access to this workstation. My heart began to race as I clicked it open. Inside was a folder labeled Final_Revision. The timestamp was from yesterday. Inside the folder were corrupted files and encrypted logs. My instinct screamed at me. Someone had been trying to copy or sabotage my work again. I immediately called Clara. She rushed over from the lab. When she saw the drive, her face turned white. "That's not ours," she said. "I checked the security feed this morning. Someone used your badge after hours." My badge. She nodded, opening her laptop and logging into the system. After a few minutes, she turned the screen toward me. The footage showed a man entering my office around midnight, wearing a cap. The camera caught his profile as he turned, enough for me to see the familiar shape of his jaw. It was Ethan. I felt my blood go cold. "He doesn't even work here anymore," I whispered. "How did he?" "He still had a spare keycard," Clara said, typing quickly. "He must have cloned your ID before he left. He probably thought he could steal your new designs." Anger rose in my throat, raw, blinding. It wasn't enough that he'd ruined me once. He wanted to destroy what I'd rebuilt. "Call security," I said. They reviewed the footage, confirmed the breach, and the company filed a report. But the police said unless they could prove he used the data, there wasn't much they could do. The USB was encrypted, unreadable, without his access key. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my laptop, wondering how far he'd go. The next morning, I found out. An email hit my inbox around 7 a.m., subject line: "Let's make a deal. You can keep your fame, Lily. I just want what's fair. You'll give me co-credit on the new design and a share of the next round's profits. Otherwise, I'll release everything. All your work, every version, every revision. Let's see if the world still thinks you're the genius." He'd attached a screenshot, the corrupted files from the stolen USB. He was threatening me. For a few minutes, I just stared at the message, my pulse pounding. He was cornered, desperate, but still trying to manipulate me. I called Clara again. "He's blackmailing me now," I said. Her voice hardened. "We can't let him. We'll take it to the CEO." But I stopped her.
"No.
If he leaks the files, the project gets delayed again. Investors panic. The CEO could lose everything. He'd hate another scandal. Then what are you going to do?" I hesitated. Something I should have done a long time ago. I spent that night gathering evidence. Every email, every timestamp, every message he'd sent me. I even dug up the old texts from when he'd promised to help me with the prototype. I organized them in a folder labeled Truth. Then I reached out to an old friend, Trevor, a journalist I knew from college who now worked for a major tech magazine. He'd tried to interview me before, but I'd declined. Now I was ready. We met at a coffee shop downtown. The place smelled like roasted beans and rain. Trevor leaned forward, eyes sharp but kind. "You're sure you want to go on record, Lily? Once this is out, you can't take it back." I nodded. I don't want revenge. I just want the truth to exist somewhere besides my own hard drive. He smiled slightly. "Then let's do it right." For the next 2 hours, I told him everything, from the invention to the betrayal, to the live announcement, to the new blackmail. He recorded it all, his expression shifting between disbelief and anger. At the end, he said, "I'll verify every document. I'll protect your identity until the legal side's clear. But when this runs, it's going to burn." "I can handle it," I said quietly. What I didn't expect was how fast it would all unravel. 2 days later, the article went live. The inside story: engineer betrayed by family faces new threat. It spread like wildfire. They didn't name Ethan directly. They called him a senior relative and ex-employee, but everyone knew. His LinkedIn disappeared. His professional network collapsed overnight. The CEO called me personally. "You did the right thing," he said firmly. "We'll handle the rest." But even as he reassured me, part of me knew this wasn't about justice anymore. This was about ending something, cutting the last thread tying me to him. 3 days later, I received a final message. "You destroyed me, Lily. I hope you're proud." I stared at the words for a long time before replying.
No, Ethan.
"You destroyed yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you." I never heard from him again. A month later, I stood on a stage at a tech innovation event. The hall was packed, journalists, engineers, students. The lights were blinding, and the applause echoed in my chest. The CEO introduced me as one of the brightest minds shaping the future of robotics. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd and saw 1,000 faces waiting for something inspirational. But all I could think about was the younger version of me, sitting in a cramped lab, believing my work didn't matter because someone else said so. I took a deep breath and said, "I used to think invention was just about creativity, about making something new. But I've learned it's also about resilience. Sometimes you have to rebuild not just your work, but yourself. And that's okay. Because no one can steal what's truly yours, not if you refuse to stop creating." The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in that moment, I finally felt peace. Afterward, Clara hugged me. "That was perfect," she said. He'd hate how good that sounded. I laughed, genuinely this time. He doesn't get to live rent-free in my head anymore. Later that night, I walked along the waterfront alone, watching the city lights ripple on the water. My reflection shimmered with them. Not the timid, unsure version of myself from before, but someone stronger. Someone who had learned that justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes, it's just the courage to move on, knowing you've survived the storm. I closed my eyes, letting the wind brush my hair back. For the first time in years, the future didn't scare me. It felt open, like a blank page waiting to be written. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally earned the right to write it on my own terms. The applause from that night still echoed in my head long after the stage lights dimmed. For weeks, I was invited to panels, interviews, and conferences. Every headline painted me as the woman who stood up to corporate theft, as if my entire existence could be summarized in one defiant act. It felt strange, empowering, yes, but also exhausting. Because behind every victory was still the hollow weight of what it had cost. People wanted the success story, not the scars. They wanted to hear how I overcame betrayal, not how sometimes I still woke up at 3 a.m. hearing Ethan's voice telling me I'd be nothing without him. They wanted to celebrate me, but I hadn't yet learned how to celebrate myself. The company moved forward fast. Phase 2 of the project, enter manufacturing, investors were thrilled, and I got promoted to head of product innovation. My salary tripled. My responsibilities multiplied. My stress skyrocketed. But the truth was, I couldn't stop working. Every time I paused, my thoughts drifted back to him. to what he'd done, to what I'd become because of it. Clara noticed before I did. One night, she stopped by my apartment with Thai takeout and said bluntly, "You need to breathe, Lily. You're starting to sound like him." I froze with a forkful of noodles halfway to my mouth. "What's that supposed to mean?" She sighed, setting down her food. "You're obsessed with perfection. You triple-check everyone's work. You don't trust anyone to touch your designs. You've turned into the same control freak you used to complain about." Her words hit harder than I expected. I set my plate down and stared at her. "I'm not like him." "I know you're not," she said gently. "But trauma changes how we build walls. You're trying so hard not to be hurt again that you're isolating yourself." I didn't respond. I just leaned back and looked at the city lights outside my window. She was right. Somewhere along the way, I had turned my pain into armor, and now I couldn't take it off. That night, after Clara left, I went through my old notebooks, the ones from before all this began. The pages were messy and free, full of doodles and crazy ideas. Back then, I'd written with joy, not fear. I realized how much I missed that version of myself, the one who created because she loved to, not because she needed to prove something. The next morning, I did something radical. I requested a 2-week leave. My boss was shocked. "You? Take a break? Are you sure?" "I think if I don't, I might break," I said honestly. I flew to Oregon, rented a cabin near the coast, and left my laptop at home. For the first few days, I did nothing but walk along the cliffs, breathe the salt air, and let myself be quiet. No deadlines. No meetings. No Ethan. But peace has a way of making buried things resurface. On the 5th day, as I sat on a weathered bench overlooking the waves, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but something in me hesitated. I answered. "Hello." "Lily." The voice was hesitant, raspy, but unmistakable. "It's Ethan." I closed my eyes, the air freezing in my chest. "How did you get this number?" I didn't mean to intrude," he said quickly. "I just wanted to talk. Please." I almost hung up. But part of me, maybe the part that still remembered family dinners, the man who'd once taught me to solder a circuit board, couldn't. "You have 5 minutes," I said coldly. He exhaled shakily. "I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm in counseling, trying to fix things, trying to figure out why I did what I did." "Why did you?" I asked before I could stop myself. There was a long silence. Then he said quietly, "Because I was scared. I'd failed so many times before you came along. I saw your design, and I panicked. I thought if I let you take the credit, I'd disappear. I told myself I was helping you, guiding you, but I was really just taking from you." I clenched my jaw. "You didn't just take my work. You took years of my life, my trust." "I know," he said softly, "and I'll never stop regretting that. I needed to say it to you directly." The sound of the waves filled the silence between us. For a long time, I didn't speak. Then, in a voice that surprised even me, I said, "You should have said it when it mattered." "I know," he whispered. "Goodbye, Lily." The call ended, and I sat there, staring at the horizon. My heart felt heavy but strangely lighter, like I had finally exhaled something I'd been holding in too long. I didn't forgive him, not completely. But I realized forgiveness wasn't about setting him free. It was about setting myself free from him. When I returned to Seattle, I started living differently. I began mentoring new hires, especially young women in engineering who often doubted their voices. I told them my story not as a warning, but as proof that integrity still matters, that no one gets to define their worth for them. I also started sketching again, not for work, but for fun. I'd forgotten how good it felt to create without pressure. Sometimes Clara would join me after hours, and we'd laugh like we used to before everything went wrong. One evening, after a mentoring session, a young intern named Sophia stopped me by the elevator. "I read your story," she said shyly. "You're the reason I didn't quit after my idea got dismissed last month." I told myself, if Lily Carter didn't give up, neither will I. Her words hit me harder than any award ever could. That night, I went home and finally deleted the folder labeled evidence from my computer. I didn't need it anymore. The story had already served its purpose, to remind me that truth doesn't vanish just because someone tries to bury it. And I didn't need reminders of him cluttering my life. A few months later, our team's second project launched successfully. The product was featured in Tech Horizon magazine, and instead of naming just one person, the article credited the whole team. That felt right. I'd learned that innovation was never about ego. It was about collaboration, trust, and resilience. At the launch party, the CEO raised a glass to me. "To Lily," he said, smiling warmly, "for proving that strength and kindness aren't opposites." Everyone cheered. I smiled, but inside, something softer shifted, a quiet acceptance. After the party, I walked out onto the balcony, overlooking the city. Clara joined me, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, looking at the skyline. "For the first time, I actually think I am." She smiled. "You know, if we ever make a movie about your life, I want to play the supportive best friend." I laughed.
Deal.
"But you're not stealing my spotlight."
She grinned.
"Wouldn't dream of it." The night air was cool, the city buzzing below us. I thought about how far I'd come, from being silenced in meetings to standing here, finally seen and heard. But more than pride, I felt gratitude. For Clara, for the people who believed me, for the chance to rebuild. And maybe even, in some distant, detached way, for Ethan, because his betrayal had forced me to find a strength I didn't know I had. I went home that night and opened my journal. On a blank page, I wrote, "What he stole was my invention. What he couldn't steal was my spirit. That's mine. Always was." I closed the book, turned off the light, and let myself sleep without dreams. The past had finally stopped haunting me. But as peaceful as I felt, I also sensed something else, a new beginning forming quietly beneath the calm. Because for the first time, I wasn't defined by what I'd lost. I was defined by what I'd built afterward. And that, I realized, was the real invention, one even he could never take credit for. The lights of the convention center glowed like 1,000 stars when I arrived that morning. It was the day of the International Tech Expo, the biggest event in our industry, and ironically, the same place where my uncle had once stolen my spotlight. This time, the air felt different. My badge didn't say assistant or junior researcher. It said CEO, Novamind Innovations. As I walked through the glass doors, 100 memories collided in my mind. The night I found my uncle's betrayal, the humiliation at the dinner table, the lonely nights of rebuilding from scratch. Each one had hurt, but each had also carved something strong inside me. Pain had become purpose. I could see the huge LED banner hanging above the main stage. Keynote speaker, Dr. Emily Carter, inventor of the SynaptIQ neural interface. My invention. My name. Finally together. I found a quiet corner before the event started and took a moment to breathe. The organizers were running around, adjusting lights, testing sound. I closed my eyes and thought about my mom, how she'd looked at me the night I left home with my duffel bag and tear-streaked face. She had whispered, "Don't let his lies become your story." I hadn't. The announcement came that the keynote would start in 10 minutes. As I straightened my blazer, I caught sight of someone standing near the back of the hall. Graying hair, familiar posture. My chest tightened instantly. It was Uncle Richard. He looked older, thinner, and strangely smaller than I remembered. There was no entourage around him this time, no expensive watch flashing under the lights. He stood there, hands clasped nervously, watching me from a distance like he wasn't sure if he belonged there. Our eyes met. For a split second, the years fell away. I was that naive girl again, full of trust, ready to show him her ideas. But then the memory of him on stage, accepting the award for my work, hit like a slap. He mouthed something, maybe congratulations, but I turned away and walked toward the stage. The host introduced me, her voice ringing through the speakers. "Please welcome Dr. Emily Carter, the brilliant mind behind SynaptIQ, a breakthrough in neural technology that has redefined human-machine interface. Applause roared. Cameras flashed. My name echoed across the room, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch when I heard it. I stepped onto the stage and smiled, but it wasn't pride I felt, it was peace. Thank you, I began, adjusting the mic. When I started this journey, I was a young engineer working in a small home lab. I had a dream, to create something that could help people reconnect with their minds after trauma. It wasn't easy. I faced setbacks, doubts, and betrayal. But every failure became fuel. I let my eyes sweep the audience, and then paused just long enough to look straight at Uncle Richard. He froze. I once watched someone take credit for work that wasn't theirs. I continued softly, but my voice carried strength. For a while, it broke me. I thought the world would never see me for who I truly was. But I learned something important. No one can steal your light if you keep creating new ones. A murmur spread through the crowd. I smiled, holding my gaze on him for another second before moving on with my speech. Afterward, people surrounded me, reporters, investors, engineers wanting to collaborate. I shook hands, smiled for cameras, gave interviews. But my eyes kept flicking to the back of the room, where my uncle still stood. When the crowd began to thin, I finally walked toward him. He looked like he wanted to run, but he stayed. Emily, he said quietly, his voice shaky. I didn't expect you'd want to see me. I didn't, I replied honestly. But you came anyway. He nodded, looking down. I've been watching you. You've done incredible things. I guess I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I crossed my arms. Sorry for what exactly? For stealing my work? For humiliating me? For lying to your entire company? His face crumpled. For all of it, he whispered. I lost everything, Emily. The board found out the truth, eventually. My reputation's gone. I've been trying to rebuild, but no one trusts me anymore. You were right all along. A strange mix of satisfaction and sadness churned in me. I'd imagined this moment countless times, him broken, apologizing, realizing what he'd done. But standing there, I didn't feel triumphant. Just tired. I don't hate you anymore, I said after a long pause. But I can't forgive you either. Not yet. You didn't just steal my idea. You made me doubt myself. You made me feel small. I had to rebuild from ashes you left behind. He nodded, eyes wet. I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I'm proud of you. That caught me off guard. The same man who'd once laughed when I called myself a scientist was now telling me he was proud. I searched his face for sarcasm, but there was none. Only regret. Take care, Uncle Richard, I said quietly. I hope you find peace too. And I walked away, not out of anger, but closure. Later that night, after the awards and the interviews, I found myself alone on the rooftop of the hotel, city lights sprawling beneath me. The air was cool, the kind that tastes like endings and beginnings all at once. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who worked late nights in a tiny garage, dreaming of changing the world. The one who cried when her uncle stole her invention. The one who almost gave up. She didn't know then that losing everything was the best thing that could have happened to her. Because it forced her to build something stronger, purer, truly hers. My phone buzzed with a new message. It was from the CEO of Horizon Technologies, the company that had once fired me under Richard's pressure. Dr. Carter, we're interested in discussing a potential collaboration with Novamind. Would you be open to a meeting? I smiled. The irony was delicious. I typed back. Happy to talk, but this time, make sure my name's on the contract. As I hit send, laughter bubbled up from my chest. Light and genuine, the kind I hadn't felt in years. I leaned on the railing and whispered to the city below, you can take my credit, but you can't take my creation. Because that was the truth. My uncle could steal my invention, my recognition, even my pride, but he could never steal my soul. And that night, as the skyline shimmered around me, I finally understood. Betrayal doesn't define you. What you do after it does. I walked back inside, head high, Knowing this time the world saw me exactly as I was. Not someone's niece, not someone's shadow, but Emily Carter, the woman who reclaimed her name and built her empire from the ruins. And that was my real invention.